Hello and welcome to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast. This show digs into the challenges in growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit. I'm Christine Era.
And I'm Steve Bousquet. We are the green industry experts in profit, growth, and leadership.
Good afternoon. Steve White is my guest today on the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast. Steve and I have been friends for over 20 years, and he is kind of a leader in the lawn care industry in Tennessee and in the south of Tennessee, and actually probably in all of the South. Welcome to today's podcast, Steve.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
And so, Steve, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay. I am Steve White. I've owned Second Nature since 1993 when we founded the company. I'm also a dad. I have two wonderful children, Spencer and Rachel. One is 31, the other is 22. I'm also the husband of 36 years with my wife, Angela, and we've been married since 1988. I think that's 36 years. Somebody else can do the math, but it's 30 plus years for sure. What else you want to know? Let's see. I've got.
What's your business do? What's your company do?
Well, the company does turf and ornamental care. I like to say to people that we make green things greener. We take care of any insect, disease, nutritional needs of your horticultural landscape, basically. A lot of times it's easier to say the things that we don't do. We're not a pruning, mulching, cutting company. We're better lives, better horticulture through chemistry kind of people. So anything to do with nutrition, insect disease control, we're in on it.
Awesome. And where do you do this?
We do it in Middle Tennessee. Includes Nashville, Davidson County proper, and all of the surrounding suburbs. So our MSA is fairly large. The area that we treat in the metropolitan statistical area is rather large. We travel from our central office all the way just shy of Bowling Green, Kentucky, and go all the way down almost to Huntsville.
Nice. And when did you start the business again? I know you said it earlier, but I can't remember. When was it?
1993.
93. Right. Nice. And so obviously after college, you started the business. So what did you do before you started the business?
Well, I went to college right out of high school. I was headed to medical school and or pharmacy school, whichever one would take me. And my degree is in biology and chemistry. And I got out and did a lot of work as a undergrad in the medical field, and realized I didn't care for it. And so I was kind of stuck with a biology and chemistry degree. Not a lot you can do with that unless you go higher up in the education. And so I was looking for something that I could use my degree in and be able to work outside, because that was where my love was. I don't particularly care to be indoors. So, yeah.
So was there a particular job that got you ready for entrepreneurship or owning your own company?
Yeah, I can kind of remember, I worked for Walgreens through college. Obviously pharmacy was an interest of mine, and I was in their drugstore management program for a number of years after college. I think 7 I spent doing that. But what woke me up to becoming my own boss was an annual report that Charles Walgreens III put out, and how much money he made. And I think I was motivated to. I had worked for someone else long enough at that point that if I was going to do 100-hour weeks, I wanted to do them for myself, and that began my search for something I could do.
So you read his report and you're like, dang, man, I want in on that. That sounds pretty easy money, right? Just open a
Yeah.
business, start printing
Yes.
out fancy reports with big profit margins.
That's
And we
right.
know that's typically how it never goes, right? There's a
That's right.
huge, steep learning curve and a million things that we're completely unaware of when we opened or started our businesses. Many times we start a business at things we love to do or that come easy to us. And then we realize that that's a small part or a percentage of a business. There's a lot of things that aren't so much in our wheelhouse or aren't so much fun that we now have to, be responsible for, or hiring, training, recruiting, retention, accounting, legal, state regulations, and all kinds of fun stuff. Maintaining equipment, financing growth, being part of the community, which is not
Yes.
fun for everybody. We love it, but it's because of our strengths. So you start this business, and so who did you start the business with? Was it you? Did you have a partner, or what was that?
Yeah. So I started the business on my own in '93 and brought a partner on in '94. A buddy of mine that I'd gone to college with, and that was a successful partnership for about 25 years. Um, and then that kind of fell apart. We went different directions. Um, but to your point earlier about the first 3 years of our business, being in business, it was so much fun because I was literally using everything I've been educated in, uh, and I was working outside and I was doing the work, and that was the most fun part for me. So to your point earlier, is that it didn't get difficult until the multiple hats that you just mentioned had to be worn. First employee forward, uh, that's when the challenges became, because then there was an HR hat, then there was a payroll tax hat. No longer we were just pulling money out of the till or whatever to buy groceries with, but now I had to actually pay taxes on payroll, and I had to do all the things that I didn't know how to do. Um, but I was smart enough to read. I will say that I read, and I knew what I didn't know. I knew that I needed to get better. And so I continued to read and seek counsel from church members and other business owners. And I got a lot of good guidance through those early years that helped me out a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. So when we met, you had only been in business for about 12 or 13 years, which is a long time for businesses because half of them don't make it to 5 years. So,
Right.
At that point, you were still on your learning curve, as I was. So what were some of the biggest challenges or struggles that you found in your growing your business over the years?
That's a great question. There's so many. I mean, I list, I can list off three, of some of the challenges. The biggest challenge I came across personally was the transition from employee to employer mindset. Um, I struggled with that for a number of years. I'm not sure that I don't still struggle with that a little bit. Um, I'm being a little facetious, but it took me a long time to realize that there was I had no one to impress. No one was going to make me get up. No one was going to make me, make the donuts, so to speak. So I had to get out of bed, and I had to find what motivated me, or what, better yet, what drove me to do that. And I had all the obvious things. I mean, I had a wife, had kids on the way, and that kind of stuff. But the biggest challenge for me was moving my mindset into becoming uh, an owner employer mindset, from having to get up in the morning and please someone with what time I arrived at work, and please someone with what I did at work. And the only person that was watching was me. And I think I had the hardest time with that transition. And I'm sure other people, take to it like a duck in water. But for me, it took several years for me to realize that I'm it. I'm the guy who has to find the drive and find the motivation to make it happen. and I have to be able to I'm the only applauder.
You're the biggest audience.
That's it.
Your wife, she's your biggest fan.
Well, yeah, she is.
But absolutely. And wow, thinking about that, and a lot of people. So I was very fortunate that I started my business in high school. It was only me for many years who I was really responsible for. But you started your company. You already were married, and you probably had responsibilities, beyond just paying rent and an apartment. You probably had a house and a lot of responsibilities. That's a lot of pressure, but that's interesting. I did not know about that with the mindset challenge, the employee mindset shifting to the owner mindset, and you're it, right? The buck stops here. You're responsible for your own, not only your own, but your team that you're going to build. Interesting. So mindset was a big challenge for a couple of years. So what steps did you take to overcome that or get through that?
So back then, and don't hold me to the years, but I was reading books a lot. I knew enough to know that I didn't know, right? So I had read a book. Well, there were several things going on in my life in 1993. That was a stressful year because I had just bought a house, just had a baby, and just bought a business. So, or just started.
Oh, you loaded it all in one car and pointed it downhill or uphill.
That's exactly right. So it was a rough couple years. I think my first year I had gone, I think I made 17 grand the first year of our business. And that was down from like 24 or something like that as a executive assistant at Walgreens. So yeah, big pay cut. My wife had just had a baby, and of course she was a med tech, and she was making good money, which was kind of what was floating my career at Walgreens. But she wanted to stay home with the baby. That was a surprise, and of course the pressure of creating a world where she could do that was real and sudden. And so I had to get busy. But back to your point, I read a book, a couple books. One was it's a weird book called Psycho-Cybernetics, and by Maxwell Malt. And then I read another book called The E-Myth, the original E-Myth book. And that might have been a few years later that I read that. But that gave me,
right?
Yes, Michael Gerber. That's right.
The only book that ever made me cry was Michael Gerber, page 212, when the story, Sarah's sharing the pie story and being overwhelmed and overworked and her grandmother and struggling. Yep. Love that book. Yep.
Yes, it's a good book. But that helped me to know, to know what to do to get out of that mind frame of I'm an employee. Well, I am an employee, but I'm also I'm my biggest coach. I'm my biggest cheerleader. I have to find the inner resolve to do the things that starting a business requires. So those books helped me a lot.
Great. And what was the first one?
It's called Psycho-Cybernetics.
Psycho-Cybernetics.
Yeah. Maxwell Maltz. That was a light bulb book for me.
Okay.
I'll give you one of the things that it talked about was the thing. One of the things that stuck with me that I'll share with you is he talks in there about people who, when they hear a phone ring, they have to answer it, and you can choose to be that person or the person who can just listen to the phone ring.
Oh,
and I thought that was incredible because in business, when the phone rings, you answer it, right? But I had been around that. My mother, I can remember that every time the freaking phone rang, she answered it. And I'm like, just why do people? It's like a conditioning thing, right?
Sure.
It made me start thinking in a different mindset that I don't have to respond to every outside stimulus that hits me. I can choose not to answer the phone. And that was enlightening to me, as well as many other things in that book. Please don't press me to share any more tidbits on that.
That's okay.
It made a difference for me in my mindset. And once I read that, then I started seeking out more books a little more specific to entrepreneurship and business ownership. But I think the very next book I read was the E-Myth, and then right after that was Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Best, one of the best books.
Yep.
One of the best books. I have one of the original printings of that book, and
no way.
They've changed it and updated it, and
that many times.
Yeah, someone challenged, oh no, that can't be a first edition, and I read some of the parts that are no longer in it because it's not woke or socially acceptable anymore. Well, in true, it wasn't. It was the 1950s and 60s when he wrote that book, I think, and or early 60s. And but absolutely, yep, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Absolutely, that is must read. I used to read that, and probably due to read it again. That was my every year read. There's 2 or 3 books I read every single year, and that was on that on my every year list. So yes, I got the newer version. That's how I knew what
had been changed.
That had been changed. So I was like, oh, but it was good advice. It was about some of it was how to be a husband and how to be a wife, and how to support each other, or a spouse, or in a relationship, how to support each other in those roles, and certain behaviors and activities. Because if we have a happy life at home, right, it transitions over into work, and if it's not, then they're not mutually exclusive for sure. And, life balance, I know, is a huge thing for you. So, not that as entrepreneurs, we don't have these perfectly balanced lives, but we have to be aware when we're not balanced, and at least when we need to show up to support people as best we can. So that book had some input on that it no longer has, which is fortunate and unfortunate. It could be written in a very specific way that would be more supportive of everyone. Because, pre-1972, women were not even allowed to have credit cards. So it had a little bit of a different view on that, right? Imagine that nowadays. That would be, right, that's never going to happen. Because a lot of women run the financial aspect of their households. So that would, they've stepped into that role. All right. So you read some books, you kind of got over the mindset, and you're in business, you figured out you're the guy. What was the next biggest struggle?
Next biggest struggle was to be in business and make money.
Ooh, what do you think? I think a lot of people, me included, when I first started, you think you just start a business and you start doing the stuff that business does, and you'll make money. That's how it goes.
I had this terrible conversation with an attorney at some point, and he said he was looking at my balance sheet, and we were putting together a document, and he said, your business is really not worth anything. I said, well, thanks, man, appreciate that. And he said, no, really, it's just not worth anything. That you couldn't sell it for anything. And he said, you basically are a clearinghouse. And I'm like, a clearinghouse? And he said, yeah, everything you make, you spend. There's nothing left over. And I said, well, yeah, okay. So that was probably in 2001, 2002. And by 2006, I remember the date pretty specifically. I attended a seminar, listening to a business guru talk, and realized that I needed to do something to make myself profitable, because true enough, we were just struggling. We were paying the bills, and everybody was relatively well paid. And by that, I mean adequately. But we were not making money. And I knew I didn't want to do that the rest of my life. So I had to find help, and I did.
Right. Absolutely. Good. That is one of the things. I think people just think everybody makes money by working hard. I thought if I had the right truck, the right fertilizer spreader, my mowers were the right color. There's these big arguments on Facebook. Oh, I got a red mower and an orange mower and a yellow mower, and that's the only way to make money. And we know that's not true. You can make money regardless of what color your mower is, as long as you're estimating and your numbers are correct, and you're estimating correctly, your numbers. And I fell into that trap of, as long as I knew how to do the things. So I got all these certifications, design certifications, nurseryman certifications, environment, all this, and still not making money. And I'm like, whoa, I'm playing by the game. I'm playing by the rules here. I have all this education and I have all this cool equipment. Why am I not making money? And, right. It's just like, you got to learn how to make money. And, you can make money regardless of your fertilizer or whatever you're doing, as long as your numbers are right. And that's your actual goal, is to turn a profit. And profit is a responsibility, because one of the things I've learned, I visited over, 40 different contractors all across the country, and met with hundreds of business owners. And one of the things that really hit me about 2 or 3 years ago when COVID happened was the strength of a community is really measured by the strength of the small businesses in that community. So as we get past that, we need to realize that we need the profitability so we can be a strong business in a strong community.
Yeah, Steve, and that's a great point. And you said something a minute ago. Profitability is a responsibility. And I would say, and I'm not coining anything original here, but success is a duty, and that would include profitability. And I didn't realize that it was my responsibility, my duty, to be successful at what I'm doing. And when I realized that, it changes how you approach things. It's no longer just for the profitability, right? It's more like, you start having to define, what does success look like? Well, it is being a part of a community. And I hate using the word give back, but I don't know of another phrase that better describes it, but being active in the community and making it less about how much I can get from people, but more about how much we can make a difference in other people's lives. And I know that sounds a little altruistic and all that, but the reality is you don't really start making money until that mindset starts happening. Because well, let me back up. You might make some money, but it has less meaning. If you're not giving some of it away, it doesn't mean as much. So, and by that, I mean time, money, whatever you can do to make the area that you live in better and the lives of your employees, man, that's a huge one. Being there for them, they're your first customer in your business. That's your first customer. That you have to take care of them well, and that spreads throughout the community. When you take care of your employees well, they take that home to their families, and their families reap the benefits of that caretaking, and it multiplies. So to your point, you're absolutely right. You can look at the health of small businesses in any community and see what's going on in that community.
Yeah, the health of the community. It was interesting. I was at a conference and one of the managers said, well, we make rich people's grass green. And I heard it and I was like, you're kind of right. We do, but we make middle class. But what we're really doing is, if you go into a community where people care enough to take care of their homes, right, they stay. And, I live in a community where for years people were leaving and people were not taking care of their homes, their lawns, picking the trash up, and it starts to go in decline. So people leave, and I pose that question to some of my friends who have moved back, what if all the good people leave, right? So, landscaping and lawn care, it's a very visual, but it's very caring of a community, and just picking up trash. And Viktor Frankl wrote in a Search for Meaning, when a man can't or a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure.
Yes.
And we met, now at our age, right, in our late 50s, we've met a lot of people who have chased money and been extremely shocked and dissatisfied once they get the money they thought was going to make them happy, or the stuff or the things they bought. They're like, oh, that's not overly fulfilling. So I think that meaning is the thing really to step in and serve, and community is our local community is something that we can really step into and impact. But if you're a new business and you're just struggling, like we were, like you at that time, I was like thinking, oh my gosh, I was $250,000 in debt in 2000, 2001 and thinking about hiding out in Alaska, right? The last thing I was thinking about was community and right the search of meaning for man, I mean, and so really it was like, how do I breathe? How do I pay this month's bill? Forget about next month or the community.
How do I stay out of jail?
Right, stay out of jail, right? Not pay my taxes. Yeah. So a lot of it goes back to knowing your numbers, and that's why I'm such a huge fan of Profit First, because it really reveals and shows us, how important and how to do it, how to make sure that we're profitable and we're paying our taxes and we're paying our people well and paying ourselves well, because we're the biggest investor in the company. We have the most at risk and we're sacrificing the most. So how about another struggle or challenge?
Oh, goodness. Another struggle. I think I struggled. I'm a guy that likes to do things myself. I don't like to. I think I struggle with delegating into my company and building people up because I felt like I was the only one who could to do the job correctly. And obviously that leads to 16-hour days, burning the candle at both ends, if you will, wearing yourself out. And then that consequently leads to not being there for your spouse and not being a good dad. And so in those respects, the balance is important. And then making the shift from, and the acceptance with being okay with the fact that you need other people to make this successful. I think that was a big challenge for me too. Because, you've known me a long time, I'm Atlas. I'll carry the world on my shoulders. I can do it. I don't need help. No, you go play. I'll work. And that's a nowhere situation when you're thinking like that. So yeah, I mean, I think the big challenge was just learning people's personalities, learning what they can bring to the table and how they show up at work and actually enjoying how they come to work. And so, even as late as last year, learning that I've been putting people in places where they're spending 80% of their time working in things that don't make them particularly happy. When all this time I could have had them 80% in the thing that they do enjoy. Just being cognizant of that, but if you go back to the beginning, as far as like when we were first starting out, the challenges back then was, I would have to say just me piling more and more on my plate and becoming less and less in all the other roles that I did. That was a big challenge.
Taking on too much stuff.
Yeah.
And, you talked about aligning your team and, we worked with your team. I worked with your team on their Clifton Strengths, and we did the team strengths, and we met your team in person and did that workshop. And I think your team got a lot out of it. They still, when I talk to them, they still refer back to that. And right, it's like aligning our team. So one of the kind of like struggles that we have in business is thinking we're going to define a role and then fit somebody into that role instead of like who's on our team and what are their strengths and talents and how do we align that with what the company's mission is. And that's really been a super thing. And I think, you're seeing it in your team now as they've developed, especially over the last 18 months and 2 years, a little bit more. And you're allowing them to be more fully aware of their strengths and utilize them instead of like, no, this is what the role is. This is the job description. And I hate job descriptions. I'm a big fan of role missions or the mission of the role because it's not static. I love a term, nonlinear dynamic chaos. And basically that means we're starting at one point, we're trying to get to another point, and it's not linear. So as we go along our journey, we're learning, and we have successes, then we have some challenges, and we learn from those, and we move forward. So it's not this straight line, and the process of the learning or the challenges is part of the journey. It's not going to not happen. We need that to find out. It keeps us on the right path because a lot of times, maybe I'm the only one, maybe not. I had this great idea for something or some project, or it could be an offering or something in my business. And then as the journey goes along, it takes a little bit of a different direction because I realized that was not the real issue or challenge. And we end up in a better place because of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Core Growth Strategies provides business growth management solutions through cloud accounting, bookkeeping, and strategic business consulting programs. Our team works with small businesses in lawn care and landscape and trade industries throughout the U.S. We increase our clients' business acumen by creating business performance transparency through financials and strategic advisement based on industry best practices and benchmarks. Our experienced team provides support, guidance, and coaching, thereby allowing our clients to connect with viable data and discover their own solutions. Core Growth Strategies programs and services are designed to get your business from where it is now to where you have always dreamed it to be. Visit us today at coregrowthstrategies.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Don't miss our exclusive limited time podcast special. Just mention promo code GPA Pro to any member of our team during your complimentary consultation, or enter the promo code on our site when you sign up for one of our online programs. That's promo code GPA Pro.
So what was something that you have thought was a really great idea for your business that it ended up not being? And how do you know? So one of my challenges, I don't quit. It's a kind of a real asset, but it's also a basement for me, not knowing when to quit. Share something that you started in your company you thought was going to be a big hit, and then you learned that it was not. And how did you know when to get out of that or stop doing that?
Well, at some point, think just off the top of my head, I can remember thinking that getting the company bigger is going to lead to better. And I think it was probably 2007, 2008. I was not making, part of the reason I wasn't making money is because I had opened our business up to poor customers. Not poor in financially, just poor for us. They were not a good choice for us. And
Not
we were
good.
driving everywhere to do the smallest of jobs, right? So I wasn't spending any time really defining who my customer was and how the relationship between the customer and me could be better, right? So I was chasing, I guess, for lack of a better way to say it, I was just chasing the money. And there are times when you chase money and you come away with less. So,
it's elusive, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely, and you wouldn't think that because, one of the things when you started your company the same way and as I did, which was highly uncapitalized, no investors, and we just ran faster and worked harder than everybody else. And I think that's really in the beginning what helped us stay alive past that 5-year mark. It's just the fact that the energy levels, and I'm not asking anybody do that by any means. I'm just saying I know your story and I know my story. So I know that the only way we survived is because I wore 10 hats a day and worked around the clock. And, I can remember back in the early days when telemarketing, a lot of people won't even remember what that is, but when telemarketing was the way to put business on, you just got the phone book out and started calling people. Can I come give you an estimate? And, obviously you can't do that anymore, but I would come back and after a day of production and enter in my sales for the day and then start telemarketing at 8:30 p.m. And I would telemarket till 10 o'clock, till mamas putting babies to bed would say, could you please not call me this late? So to your point, I mean, I think that's what didn't work out. I mean, just off the top of my head is that I'm not enough alone. I'm not enough. I can't work enough to be successful by myself. Not in this business for sure.
Right. So you said, okay, we're going to grow the business. We're going to go anywhere. We're going to do anything for a dime. How many years did you do that for? Before you said, "Oh, this is not the road."
So I'm embarrassed to say, I think we probably did that up until about 2006, 2007.
So a few years.
A few years from 93. Yeah. From 1993 to 2006. So, and that's when everything changed for me, for my company, for the people in my company, when we defined where we were willing to drive, defined who our customer was going to be, and only participated in those between those guardrails, right? We set our own guardrails and we stayed on that track, and that's when we started making money. Our top line, I think that year went from $1.6 million in 2006, down to like 1.1, because we just called everybody that wasn't fitting that mold, that die, and we said, we can no longer service you. We're sorry, and we had to let them go. And it was a tough year, man. Plus it hurt the pride, right? It's like, dude, we were at $1.6 million at that point, and we dropped. We went back probably 3 years in revenue. Yeah. So it was a tough year, but
top line mentality, absolutely been there, lived it. Yep. And even now, I have coaching clients. I have to be, hey, they're like, oh, my top line revenue went down. I'm like, yeah, but your net went up 25%. They're like, I know, but my top line revenue went down. I'm like, yeah, but you can't deposit top line. You can deposit that net line.
That's right.
And they're like, yeah, but my top line revenue went down. So we're driven, the more, the bigger, the better. And that's just not reality. And customers are actually costing us, especially if we're willing to dance with any client that shows up if they don't fit our ideal client mix. Absolutely. So it took 3 years. That's typically, I wish things took me 3 years. Sometimes it took me 10 years to figure out why not to do stuff, because I was, frequently determined to figure it out or price it different or it's the wrong people or the wrong customer. And it was just a wrong service to have. So if you're in too many services now, what are some of the signs of that, right? Super stressed out, really difficult customers. So difficult customers are people that are complainers. They're slow payers. They don't ever give you a referral. Every time that they want to buy something, they're asking for a discount or sharpen your pencil. One of my, when I do sales and people were asking me to sharpen my pencil, I was like, all I brought was this like dull marker or a crayon, it's wide and it doesn't like very sharp. So, and they would laugh and we would move on. But when I was first in business, I would go, oh, okay, I'll snap my pencil. I'll get it down to where not only am I not making any money, I'm paying you to do this job for you. And somehow you're going to be, complain about that. And we always, the complainers complain. That's what they do.
I've got this mind picture of you standing on the stoop of somebody's porch with you remember those great big Husky pencils that we had in kindergarten?
Yeah.
That big fat one that you could never sharpen. It has the big hole on the pencil sharpener, but it's like you could never get that sucker sharp. No. I picture you holding that big Husky pencil. Thanks for that, by the way.
But yeah, oh, you're welcome. Yeah, but when I first you get, the old, you give me a good price, I'm going to tell all my friends you're going to have more work than you can do. We all fell for that. It's it's very misleading, and those are predator. They have another guy. If they don't hire you, you'll never make a dime off them. So we all have to go through those and learn. And there, we used to do a lot of lawn mowing and lawn maintenance, and there was the people, in our community, they would have 2 or 3 mowing companies a year because they wouldn't pay anybody. And then they would come in and they would always complain to the next guy, oh, yeah, I fired them because such and such. And reality was, after about 3 or 4 years, everybody got smart, and then they couldn't find anybody to cut their lawn because everybody would say, they don't pay. We had an attorney in our town. He had to start calling people from out of state to do work at his house because he just never paid anybody, and he had burned everybody in the local area. So, and he was you'll have more work, all my cousins, and, and it's like, well, you're already not paying me. I need more people that don't pay me. No, thank you.
Right?
Right.
You don't
Painful.
have nothing to do with that.
Nothing. So you had, these challenges and these kind of conflicts and everything. What was the lowest point of your business for you emotionally?
Oh, Steve, you opened up a Pandora's box. Well, dude, I think probably the lowest point in my business was probably, well, I know it was. I hate to say that it was the year I started, but it really was in the beginning. All that stress that we talked about earlier, it spun me into a bout of depression in the early years of my business. That was very, very dark and difficult to overcome. And, that's, everything's been sweet compared to those years. I wouldn't trade what I learned in those 3 years, 2-3 years that I battled that, but really for anything, because I grew as an individual, and it humbled me quite a bit. But that struggle was probably brought on just simply due to the amount of stress that I was putting on myself to be a successful father, husband, and get a business off the ground. So, that was the darkest days for me. And since then, I've had other dark days and periods, but that was certainly the pinnacle. That was a 3-year ordeal that was very difficult to climb out of. But praise God, I got out of it, and I had a lot of great people come to my aid, both in the community, in my church, in my family, and I am now the gregarious guy you see in front of you because I did that.
So, when you bring up a component of business is in all businesses, especially, small business, because it's real and it's in front of us, and that's mental health. And, I frequently talked about that's why we can't have these bad, difficult customers in our businesses, because it creates a certain amount of unhealthy mental health, right?
Yes.
Our teams have to deal with these people that are difficult, pain in the butt customers. They're rude, they're obnoxious, they're mean. Business is already tough enough without dealing with those types of clients. But the mental health of the owner really is so important. And we're really seen as supermen and superwomen if you own a business, right? You're seen as a little bit different. And if you're listening to this, most of the time, you usually can talk to other business owners way easier than anybody else, even in your own family, because they understand you. But they see us as kind of like, oh, you don't get sick. You don't, mental health is never an issue. You always have the money figured out, and you always have the answers. And that's just not true. We have more stress, and it's we don't show it and we don't share it. I remember, when I was going through, ready to hide out in Alaska, and that $250,000 back in 2001, my wife did not know.
Yeah.
She didn't know until 5 years later when I was sharing that story at a conference. And she looked at me like, what? But I carried that with me for years because I felt responsible for getting me there, and I felt responsible for getting me out. So, mental health is a big component.
That's so true, man. You are. It's the way you were made. You not only feel that you're responsible, you are. There's nobody going to convince you that you're not responsible for where you've ended up, because you own it. It's it's extreme. It's your extreme ownership of the conditions around you. Yes, there are outside influences, but that's the thing, is that reality, whether it's 100% true or not, is our truth. And that's another thing I have a hard time saying, but it's the way people are made. A lot of people end up where they end up, and they don't own the responsibility that belongs to them for why they're there. You and I, and I'm sure there are many other people like that, we take on the responsibility, all of it. Like, even if there's outside forces pushing us to make worse decisions than we could have made, we still own it. It's like, well, I did that. I did that. And, I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying that in our minds, it's 100% true. So saying, oh, well, you had a lot of things going on that caused you to feel that way, that's the truth. But in our minds, all the things that we have going on were decisions that we made at some point. So we're owning it, right? So
It's owning it. And, it's interesting because that's why I do the coaching. That's why I'm involved in Green Profit Academy, because, I know your story. I know my story. And, we've lived through it. We made it to the other side. And but helping people who are younger than us, who are going through, know that they're not alone, that there's a way out. Hey, here's the path. Here's the light. There's somebody who cares and somebody that's going to give you honest answers. One of the biggest things that I've noticed in my coaching over the past years is I think people think business is going to be easier. And it's not. It's not easy. And, it got easier at year 38, right? Or 35. But the first 30 years, it's not easier. I think they're a little bit surprised that they have struggles and challenges. And in the next year, it's more struggles and challenges. But that's what business is, right? That's what life is. It's really working through those struggles and challenges and learning and improving. I think the biggest struggle is we think that we're going to do the same exact thing, and we're not going to have the same exact problems. But if we do the same exact things, we have the same challenges, and it's just rinse and repeat. It's really 1 year, 30 years in a row. But, business is hard, and life has challenges unexpected. And we have families. All of us have families that throw curveballs and relationships that throw curveballs. And that's just part of it. But business is really hard. And I think when we're listening to other people, you should do this and you should do that and so-and-so this and so-and-so that. And these people don't have any business experience. They don't know how to read a balance sheet. They don't know how to understand what a P&L is or cash flow. And they don't understand return on investment and all the things that business really is. They're just giving opinions. And that can really be detrimental to people.
Yes.
But, getting back to the responsibility of a business owner, it's heavy, and it's supposed to be heavy because there's a lot of responsibility.
That's right. Couldn't agree more. I mean, I was thinking as you were talking that and I don't mean this in any snide way or negative way, but I'm grateful that it's hard. I like hard. And I'm grateful a lot of people don't like hard, because that means everybody's in business for themselves and everybody is my competitor. So obviously it's not everybody's jam to be a business owner. But if you've made the step into this realm, knock it out of the park. Take a couple steps backwards to go forwards. Don't be afraid to do that. Yeah. That's a big deal.
Yep. That's a good point. Take a step back to go forward. Yep. And, yep.
And get help. Don't be prideful. Reach out to coaches. I mean, this is the thing, I was just told the other day I needed a coach. It's like, do you have an executive coach? I'm like, what? No, I don't have an executive coach. Well, you should get an executive coach. And I'm like, in the past, I would have thrown that advice out the window and kept on trucking. But now, maybe I do need an executive coach. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? That it parts me with some of my money, but maybe I learned something that I didn't know about myself. Maybe I learned something that makes the cost of admission minuscule in one session. So that's the thing, that is a huge learning curve, was a huge learning curve for me, but it's a golden nugget. Get help, because that you can't think of all the angles. You cannot think of all the things. You need people who've walked this road a year ahead of you. You need people who've walked the road 10 years ahead of you. And you need guys, you actually, and maybe even more so, you need to take what you learn from those people and help the people that are coming down the road behind you. Because that gives where you're at the most meaning.
Yes. And we've both been doing that for years, helping people, but also getting help. We've used the same consultant. We've used the same kind of coaches. We've used different coaches, coaches that, have connected with us at different levels, whether it's financial coaches, speaking coaches, hiring coaches, right? Mindset coaching, huge. So absolutely coaching. And, we know a lot of our friends in the industry are in the top 10% of the industry, and they all have coaches, or they get coaching in some way for themselves and their team. So they don't just keep it focused on themselves. They realize they can't build their whole team up by themselves, and they let these coaches step in and help with that.
Yeah.
So
it is those, right. By the way, are the ones that are the most successful. And I don't mean just in dollars. I mean just all the way around. Those are going to be the happiest business owners. They're going to have the happiest home lives. It permeates throughout whatever circle of influence they're in.
Yeah. I think you had said, there's going to be consultants that can teach you how to get rich, but you're going to be miserable at home, right? So, and I think you're right. They're the happiest people. They hate their job the least. They actually enjoy their companies and their jobs. They built a life and a business that they can love and enjoy. Because once you make a certain amount of money, if it doesn't have meaning, right, you turn to pleasure, which is distracting and expensive, and it's not building, it's not building your life. It's not building your community. So absolutely, yeah, they definitely are the most stable. And I will say during COVID that people that were getting the coaching that I know, regardless of who their coaching was, did the best.
Yeah.
They made it through the best and rebounded the fastest and are on a better path. So
it feeds the fires of hope is what that's what it does for me. It feeds the fires of hope when you are intentionally being interactive with people that are interested in giving advice and not afraid to even be wrong in the advice giving. That's one thing that I noticed in my life is that so many people that I looked up to that could have given me advice withheld advice because they were afraid to give me the wrong advice. Never be afraid. If you have to give the disclaimer up front, I'll tell you a really fast story on that. We had a Thanksgiving soiree here at my house this year, and there were 20 people here. And of the 20 that, the ones that were 25 and under were quite a number in quite a few of them in number. And I brought them all in the living room and I said, "Hey, I want to give you some unsolicited advice. Are you up for it?" And of course, the looks I got in the room were just kind of weird, right? It's like some of these kids are like the newly married husbands and wives of my nephews, nieces, and that kind of thing. And they don't really know me. And I said, "Listen, here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about this." And I didn't have anybody that told me that when I was your age. So I think if you'll do this, it'll make a big difference in your life. And they're all just kind of looking at one another going, "Well, why are you telling us this?" And I said, "I'm telling you this because I think that I know anything that if I know you're about to walk into a huge hole or off a bridge that no longer exists, I'm duty bound to share that info. You do what you do with it as you will, but I'm going to tell you because I care enough to tell you. Don't walk into that big hole. Don't walk into that wall." And because even if you wanted to walk in the wall, I'm not afraid to tell you that I think you should not walk into the wall because it hurt. I walked into it and it hurt. So, hey, don't do that unless you want to hurt, that's, I think it's at the age we are, Steve, it's not the advice was, they were all looking for homes and they couldn't afford the homes.
Gotcha.
They buy a multiplex of some sort, a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex. I said, let that be your first home. Go out on the limb, live in one and rent the others. I said, that's your first home because that's going to be your FHA loan, and most likely, and you're going to be able to get into it for a lot less. I said, now, that's a rule of thumb. And I said, if I had known that, I'd be much, much more net worth at this point than I would have not doing it the way I did it. I rented for years, and not that there's anything wrong with that. And there's a financial strategy for that. I'm just saying, for me, these are all kids that are griping about not being able to afford a home. I said,
right.
When you buy your first home, this is what I would tell you to do. And it'll put you in the real estate / landlord business. But hey, man, anything worthwhile takes effort. And, is as the old saying goes. So, you may have to fix a heating duct, or you may have to hire somebody to do that. I don't know. But your goal is to build net worth, not particularly make a ton of cash flow.
Gotcha.
You just want to pay your bills.
I thought you were going to give them marriage advice or something like that.
Oh, no. I could do that, but I didn't go that personal.
Okay. All right. My wife would have given them marriage advice. And her advice would be, the key to marriage is one blind eye and one deaf ear.
That's right.
All right.
Your wife is sage. That's what she is. She's just sage, baby.
He is. All right. So we're going to share a takeaway. If you're going to share some unsolicited advice, typically our listeners are between their late 20s into their late 40s. I'm sure there's some younger and a few older than that. But what advice, unsolicited advice, would you give our listeners?
Oh, man. Well, there's so many things I could say here, Steve. So, I would say in business, never do your own taxes.
No, good advice.
Just don't. Even if you're classically trained and you're an accountant, hire an accountant, hire a CPA, actually. Hire somebody who has fiduciary duty to you. And if you don't know what that is, look it up. But you want somebody that if you have to go to court, they have to stand beside you and justify their decisions that they helped you make. I learned this the hard way. Just don't do your taxes. Another piece unsolicited would be never handle payroll in-house. That's just me, because I could never get the 941s done and deposited on time, and I paid lots of penalties. So have that done outside, and it puts you as a company and an owner as above reproach. Your people, you can always blame the payroll company if their checks are screwed up. Another piece would be never hire on skills alone. You're looking for people who have and share at least some of your core values. You want to hire in that realm. You can hire the most skilled technician, or the most, in my case, the technician. You can hire the most skilled person in the world, and they can absolutely ruin your business and your culture. You want to hire for core values. It's more important that they share those with you than they share the skills they bring. If you can get both, you've hit a home run.
Okay. That's all very good advice. I'm 100% with you on all that. Have a CPA, do your taxes. I often see on Facebook where they're bragging about how cheap they got their taxes done. It's kind of like a dentist. I'm not looking for the cheapest dentist. I'm not looking for the cheapest CPA. I'm looking for the best CPA. Because I want them to take the time to be thorough and helpful, and it's a long-term relationship. Payroll, same thing. I have a full-time bookkeeper. We still have outside payroll service because it protects us at a level that I cannot provide doing it internally. It's a mind. It gives me a frame of mind. It gives the company protection. And then the last one about hiring people. We've learned over the years that the closer the person matches the company culture, the better they're going to fit, regardless of their skill set. And that's just proved itself over and over again. We can teach skills. It's hard to teach mindset and company culture if their like basic core values don't align with the company, which is, our core values are, right? Be honest.
Yeah.
Right? Be on time. Do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it. They're not anything that's
integrity.
At least in our opinion. So, well, hey, Steve, I want to thank you for joining me today. I think this is your first time being on a podcast as a guest. I hope that was exciting. I was excited to have you with us today. Is there any parting words or wisdom you'd like to share?
Oh, man. So many times I've been put on the spot to think quickly. Just seek to make a difference, not a buck, and the bucks will follow. That's my parting piece is when you serve others, it seems like the money problems kind of go away, and start with your employees. That's all I got.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, thank you all for listening, and we will be with you on the next episode of Green Profit Academy's Pro Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Green Profit Academy Pros Podcast,
the show that digs into the challenges of growing a lawn care and landscape business while maximizing your profit.